morning. Welcome to the Big Questions from Harris Academy in Peckham. I'm Nicky Campbell. Right, 75 years ago, the Church of England published the report of its Commission on Doctrine, setting out what church members should believe. The Commission had no problem at all over the idea of evolution. It said, no objection to the theory of evolution could be drawn from the two creation narratives in Genesis 1 and 2, since it is generally agreed among educated Christians that these are mythological in origin and that their value for us is symbolic rather than historical. Yet, 75 years later, many evangelical Anglicans, as well as members of other religions, cannot accept the idea that man evolved from other animals, something there is no serious scientific debate about. And some even dispute that our planet is older than the biblical count of 6,000 years. So this morning, we're asking just one very big question. Is it time all religions accepted evolution as fact? To debate this, we've got distinguished scientists, preachers, sociologists, writers and broadcasters from both sides. And they'll be encouraged by our very lively Peckham audience. That's it. You can join in too via Twitter. You can log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions. You'll find links to continue the discussion online. Well, it's not just evangelical Christians who reject human evolution as just a theory. Most Muslims do as well. Last Saturday, there was a conference in London to discuss have Muslims misunderstood evolution. Such was the opposition from Muslim student groups to this idea that the conference organisers were forced to change the venue. But the Pope, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, the new Archbishop, Justin Welby, the Chief Rabbi, all accept life on this planet, including mankind, evolved. Is it time for all religions to accept evolution as fact? Matt Ridley, you wrote this book, The Genome. Is this a debate in science at all?
No, it's not. It's quite clear now to scientists because the evidence has got stronger and stronger as the years gone by. We've now got the genetic evidence as well as the evidence from fossils and other things. We've sequenced the genome of Neanderthal man and we can clearly see how it's related to us and related to the chimpanzee and so on. And we can see that we crossbred with it about 40,000 years ago. We can read in the genes exactly the whole history of life. And we're gradually understanding all of that. And it absolutely confirms that there is descent with modification, there's natural selection, all these kind of things that Darwin said. There's plenty of room for disagreement about the details. It's not, one dogmatic theory. There's a whole bunch of theories that sexual
scientists
selection.
are pretty argumentative people, aren't they?
And so they should be. The first thing they should do when they see a consensus is try and shoot it down. But there is no question that all creatures on this planet are related. We can see that in the genes. They all share the same genetic code. It looks like a frozen accident, i.e. there's no rhyme or reason why we have a particular genetic code we do. But bacteria have it, we do it, plants have it, and it's all connected. And that, if 50 years ago you could just about say, well, we still don't know what makes living matter different from non-living matter. There might be something very special and incomprehensible at the heart of it. That's gone. We now know that it's an information technology like any other, and it's been evolving by sequential changes in DNA sequences.
So Greg Haslam, you believe the Earth is less than 10,000 years old, for example. We've got all this evidence of not just geology, but comparative anatomy, geographic distribution, why some animals are there and related to animals there, other parts of the world, some animals are there and related to animals there. The fossil record, paleontology, you name it, all these disciplines, and now the genome, and yet still you reject evolution. Why?
Well, because information doesn't arise from dead matter. Information requires a designer, and the complexity of a single human cell contains as many letters as 500 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which means that all the letters and spaces are in the right sequence in those volumes, and they are in the human cell. The Encyclopedia Britannica was printed. The human cell shows every evidence of absolutely exquisite design. And as for common features of DNA, one would expect that, because the designer would have created information that would be not only for the design of different expressions of human beings, but also of all of the animals. The fact is that it's very difficult to explain how even the first living cell came into being.
Well, that's not what evolution is about. It's about the process. It's not about the origins. Robert Ash, just a quick reaction. Robert is a paleontologist and a Christian. Reaction to what you've heard from Greg.
I suspect, Greg, that perhaps you are under the understanding that an evolutionary account of biodiversity is all about random chance. And that's not quite accurate. I mean, we haven't given you quite enough time to articulate your full view, perhaps. But that's the first thing I would say. It's not, you know, the theory of, Darwin's theory of descent with modification is not about pure entropy, right? And second of all, this idea that, you know, on top of explaining all of biodiversity, an evolutionary biologist has to explain the origin of life itself, that's also quite mistaken, which is not to say that there isn't, you know, a compelling theory, scientific theory, that uses understanding of natural mechanisms to explain the origin of life. I suspect that's true. Anyway, so those would be the first two things I would say. It's not about the origin of life, and to say that life evolved is not to say that it evolved by pure chance.
Yeah, so
but that's like saying that, it's like saying that a game of poker is not a game of chance. It's because if you're playing
but it is in an important way in the sense that there is a random element, clearly, in the sense that a mutation, for example, among many other kinds of novelty that can occur on a genetic or developmental or phenotypic
But that's my
level.
point. Those things are random.
Just let me finish. Go on.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so there isn't a random element, but they're highly constrained. You know, so, I mean, if you roll 1 million dice and expect to get all sixes, that's the refrain. You haven't said it yet, but I suspect it's coming soon. If you roll 1 million dice and get all sixes, that's pure entropy. And that's kind of the caricature of an evolutionary explanation that I hear from young Earth creationists and intelligent design advocates. That's not at all.
But evolution can only work with the chance things that it's given through mutations and other processes.
But that's the raw material.
And to me, if I can just finish, to me the way the evidence is going, it's very much the opposite of what Matt was saying before. The more we've discovered, the more problematic it is to accept evolution. It becomes more and more unbelievable. And don't just take my word for it. Someone like Thomas Nagel, who's an atheist philosopher, has recently written that, you know, the more we've discovered about the incredible complexity of life, the more unbelievable the naturalistic explanation becomes.
Yes, well, we should always listen to philosophers over scientists, needless to say. I mean, your poker analogy is actually rather a good one, because if you're playing poker, you're getting a random hand. Now, one day you're going to get 4 aces, and that random hand is going to win. It's going to be naturally selected. It's going to win that game, and you're going to get money back. So it's a machine. So what you're mixing up is the raw material, which is random noise, from the filtering mechanism, which is natural selection. They are not the same thing. And the essential difference, I think, between your point of view and the point of view of a scientist is that we are willing to change our minds. And we have changed our minds again and again and again. If somebody were to prove that the Earth is 6,000 years old and really prove it, I would cheer. I would stand on my seat and I'd say to the person involved, start learning Swedish. You will get the Nobel Prize. But I fear that nothing science says will make you change your mind.
This idea that the world is Steve, if I may, is less than 10,000 years old, that's demonstrably not true with every respect. It's just all the evidence from radiometric dating says it's not true.
What I would say is that it's actually a really exciting research framework to work in. To work in a young Earth framework, you can do research that no one else is doing. You can answer questions that no one else is asking. You can do new work, and that is exactly what is being done by a whole load of young Earth creationists that are fully qualified in their fields, people in paleontology, people in different areas of geology. They are doing research and it's being published in secular journals. I mean, I've got an example here. There's papers in sedimentary geology, sand injectites, work in the Grand Canyon. They are doing work from this young Earth framework, and it's being published in secular journals.
So what is it in that paper that says that the Earth is 6,000 years old?
Well, the funny thing about this work is that I won't go into the details of what the paper about. It's technical.
We can't deny that, you know, there are individuals who are pursuing research at this level, and you're holding up an example of one. And I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. I think that could be quite compelling. But the fact remains, you have quite a challenge in front of you to demonstrate to the community of scientists who come from a variety of philosophies and perspectives that the Earth is orders of magnitude younger than every almost every member of every major geology department in every university on this planet, is willing to say. I mean, I think to point out that these individuals are doing research is fine, and it's good to think out of the box. I give you guys lots of credit for taking an unpopular stand in a format like this.
But in
on the other hand,
dating, which is what relied upon extensively for millions and billions of years of dating rocks, the fact is
radiometric dating is one small component in a large tapestry of evidence that leads us to infer that the Earth is...
guessed for the formation of stalactites, and there are rates for the sedimentary rocks on the Earth. But I've been 200 miles down the Grand Canyon, and it's very clear from the evidence that's been pointed out to me that those rocks were laid down very rapidly, because at several points you can see layers of rocks that do a complete U-turn and then continue. Those rocks must have been
You obviously
soft.
were looking at the stromatolites, which is an algal bloom that can, that is preserved at very, very high points in the geological section of the Grand Canyon. And
but you can't cover up the point I'm making. There are totally discrepant results for radiometric dating. So if you can't, which one are you going to choose? The one you want? Or is the method
that you guys
totally
have to ask for yourselves, I think?
Why do they have to ask? Why do they have to ask it themselves, that question?
Well, I get the sense, so the idea is that the entirety of the geological community has fooled ourselves into thinking that the Earth is not millions of years old. And our colleagues are saying that this is somehow a bias on our part, that we're selectively
You can't tell the time
data,
unless you know what time the clock was set at the beginning.
Steve Jones, what would it mean if just say they're right, apart from the fact learned Swedish win a Nobel Prize? Or is it Norwegian?
It's Swedish.
Is it Swedish? OK, thank you. What would it mean for like the nuclear industry, for optics, for everything else?
It would mean a lot, but let's bear in mind that this has happened.
No,
can I just finish?
Mess with,
can I just
nuclear
finish,
material?
Can I finish?
But
please?
using it as a dating technique is not accurate.
This has happened before. Let's remember that's the beauty of science. We are willing to say we are wrong. And just over 100 years ago, an almost exact analogy happened in physics. In 1904. The president of the Royal Society said to the physics community, give up physics, you've done it all, we understand it, we know how it works, do something more interesting. 1905 came relativity, and the whole of physics collapsed. Everybody moaned and groaned for 5 years, and they thought, all right, we were wrong, we have to start again. You guys will never do that.
Seems to me in saying that younger scientists can do good work. And they're always being told that it simply matters, and yet you're admitting that younger scientists can do good work.
Do you think this is gross incompetence by 99% of the world's scientists that has led us to this position, that they've got it so catastrophically wrong?
It's a specialist discipline, isn't it? You spend years earning a PhD in a certain aspect of science, but it doesn't mean you're competent in other areas. And that means then you're not open to all of the evidence in the way that you'd like to believe.
I think it's important that we don't argue from authority here. I mean, if I wanted to use the argument for authority, I'd join the church, because that's what it's based on. Evidence is what drives this. It's not that some senior professor says this. We look at the continental drift. How are you going to explain that without hundreds of millions of years? We've got all sorts of evidence for, an asteroid hitting the Earth 65 million years ago. We've got the dinosaurs. We've got the Cambrian explosion. We've got Precambrian life. All these kind of things were happening over hundreds of million years. It's the most marvellous story. It's really fascinating. It's got a lot in it.
It is a marvellous
story. Let me move on to Abdullah. Good to see you. I think you accept the old Earth, don't you? And you accept animal evolution. You just have a problem with humans evolving. But given, I suppose this is the kind of area of questioning for you, given that there's a very high, however you measure it, by some measurements, 98% genomic similarity between humans and chimps. Why is that?
First of all, as a Muslim, a theologian in Islamic tradition, I can't really comment on the evolution aspect. I can only comment on the theology of what Islam says regarding the evolution of man.
Well, I'm just interested to know why there would be that extraordinary similarity. Did God just make us out of the same stuff?
Even if we share the same, some DNA, common DNA, it doesn't necessarily mean that we descended from animals. It just means that there were human-like beings before man or during man, or
some old Earth creationists call those pre-Adamite humans.
Probably, yeah.
But bipedal, 2 feet, walking around, big brains.
You see, but what the Quran is explicit about is about the creation of Adam. that he's a unique creation, and any life before that, the Quran is silent about.
How old was Adam when he was created?
As a Muslim, from the Quranic perspective, we don't believe that the earth is 6,000 years old.
No.
The Quran does not state anything about that, nor the authentic tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
How old was Adam when he was created? A baby, or a child, or a teenager, or a young adult?
He was created in a human form that God created.
How old?
How old? I don't know.
No, you don't know. And how was he done? What process was used?
The Quran states that God created Adam, peace be upon him, out of mud and clay, and he fashioned him with his own hands in heaven, and then he excused Adam, peace be upon him, from heaven to the earth.
Does that literal interpretation require to believe that God has hands?
Not necessarily. I mean, we don't believe in those interpretations. Yeah. Not necessarily. We believe that God has attributes, and his attributes are nothing like our attributes, but he has certain attributes. But
fashioned from clay?
He fashioned from clay and mud the way he befits his majesty.
Is that a scientific explanation for you?
It's a much more scientific explanation than ones we've just been hearing. In fact, in some ways, it's very close, as I'm sure you know, to the thoughts of Charles Darwin's great colleague, who died 100 years ago this year, Alfred Russel Wallace. Now, Wallace was an evolutionist of the most conventional kind. He was the first person who really drew maps of the distribution of animals across the world. And he believed in human evolution too, but he added something crucial, which is not really a scientific statement, which is that humans were unique and different from every other creature because we have a spirit, a God-given spirit. Now, I myself don't believe that, but I don't feel at all qualified to comment on it because it's not something which science can test. And I think you can take the Islamic model, and indeed many Christian models, in just the same way, that physically we are just shaved chimpanzees. Darwinian man, though well-behaved, is nothing but a monkey shaved, as Gilbert and Sullivan put it. But intellectually and mentally and morally, we're utterly unique. Yeah. Now, that seems to me a much more convincing point of view than the simple foolishness of saying that it all happened the day before yesterday.
What about the scientific explanations of... Because if God created the natural and scientific paradigms, which you clearly believe, the process of evolution, the theory of gravity, the theory of tectonic plates, the theory of germ infection, whatever, all of a sudden he stepped out of that paradigm to create men, or man and women.
That's the uniqueness of man.
Because of the uniqueness, but that doesn't. Okay, that's. But what? How did he do it? Does that interest you? That question, if that is in fact the case, Robert?
It is an interesting question. It's not one, to be honest, that I have a hugely strong opinion on. I guess I'm a Christian. I see the laws of nature themselves as the means by which a deity of the Christian sort of I think you can approach the divinity equally well through Islam as you can through Christianity and other religions. And what we discover in the course of doing science is the means by which the divinity, without picking a particular denomination here, does the creating. And I think this relates actually to an idea in the 19th century that is still alive and well today, in my opinion, is that you can approach the divine through the book of God's works, that is nature, and the book of God's word, which is scripture. And to ignore one or the other, I think, is very much to our detriment.
I mean, to come in here and to turn the question round, I cannot see in what way anything that has been said by the scientists on this side of the House in any way diminishes the God I believe in. I cannot see how it tackles the approach that has been common in Christian theology from Augustine of Hippo in the 5th century, right through Aquinas, through the great church fathers, that scientific inquiry is the calling of every Christian to use their brain to the full, that nothing in it does anything to diminish God. On the contrary, the whole point about human evolution that has been outlined here gives me a most wonderful and beautiful account of our solidarity with the rest of the created order.
And yet our difference from the rest of this...
But how does that come from science? See, where are you going to get the difference from? Okay, because it seems to me that and this is where I think a lot of religious people are very standoffish about Darwin, because strictly speaking, there's nothing to privilege human beings in the Darwinian picture at all. There's just a marginal difference in DNA between us and animals, and the more we study the animals, the closer they look to us. Okay, and so where are you going to keep that idea that we're creating the image and likeness of God from?
From the capacity to love, the capacity for solidarity.
Animals don't have this?
The capacity, only in a relatively rudimentary form, yes.
Oh, well,
but
I think you're very prejudiced against those animals.
Does God not love the animal kingdom as well? the capacity for self-sacrifice, which is also reflected in some aspects of the animal kingdom, but uniquely, not only in humanity, but in Christ, and the capacity to conceive God, the capacity to put ourselves in the footprints of other people.
So why do some Christians have such a problem with this?
Well, I think there's 2 points on that. One is it's a very modernist heresy. It implies that you take the scriptures and you treat them just like any other kind of logical positivist text, that it means only one thing. There's no poetics in that.
It's more than that. It's because there's a slander on the character of God here, in the sense that death, destruction, disease, predatory animals are all said to have been the history of life on earth. And it means, therefore, that the picture of the Bible that man was meant to live forever in a perfect world, which the description of Genesis 1 and 2 describes, where there were none of those evils.
But before death?
Before Adam's fall, there were no
death.
evils, no death, and never intended to be death. The Bible consistently teaches death entered the world through the rebellion of man, who was the head creature that God had made.
I know you're halfway through. Robert, you were coming in?
Very, very quickly, life without death is cancer. We need death.
Life without death.
Yes, of
without
course.
death is eternal life.
I believe in eternal life,
Okay,
and I'm going to die.
You were in full flow.
I was.
Sorry,
but I just answer that one, because I don't believe that eternal life precludes my natural death on this earth. That's what Christ himself
of course it doesn't. We're all going to die here.
But you said I was in full flow. The other point is quite simply that for most of the history of the Christian church, certainly, there hasn't been this problem.
No.
The problem arises when you find religion beginning to be on the back foot. The other problem, of course, is the way in which Darwin and his theories, the theories of evolution, have been turned into a kind of cod science. And I think a lot of perfectly legitimate religious reaction is against the translation of those theories into something crudely deterministic, utterly reductionist, which leads to the kind of version of survival of the fittest that leads you into eugenics and things like that.
Which is the...
Now, that's a perfectly legitimate thing to object to.
Counterproductive.
But that's not the serious scientific theory that we've been hearing.
Debate some people treat as ignorance versus arrogance.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Yeah, Linda.
But I don't entirely agree with Malcolm, because I think that it is true that most Christians didn't have a problem and accepted it, and that's why Darwin's buried in Westminster Abbey with full honours. However, it did pose a challenge in certain very important respects, and one of the most important one was this issue you're talking about anthropocentrism, about was everything actually designed around
us?
Around us. Are we the end point of everything? And that is a really big issue still. And it has meant that for those Christians who do accept scientific evolutionary theory, they have had to adjust their understanding of humanity's place in the whole order of things.
This is a big part of why I think people find it so difficult, and why people, not just in religion, but in secular society too, because on the whole, science has humiliated human beings. We've discovered that we have one fewer pair of chromosomes than great apes. We've discovered that we have the same number of genes as a mouse. We're basically the same set of genes as a mouse. We just turn them on in a different
But we have that frontal lobe.
Well, big deal. It's just a few more neurons. So there has been, I think, people find that humiliation really quite difficult to adjust to. But in the end, the continuity is very important and is part of it. The other reason why it's become an issue is a specific thing to do with the American Constitution, which is that you're not allowed to teach religion in American schools. So this had to be smuggled in under the science curriculum in America, and it's now spread elsewhere from that. But it's nothing to do with science. It should be religion should be allowed to be religion, and science should be allowed to teach evolution.
Inayat, you were a believer in pure creationism. There's a controversial Turkish creationist called Harun Yaha, I think I've pronounced his name right, who's kind of, in scientific circles, is a total laughingstock. You swallowed it, didn't you? And then you read some science. What happened? And you're a Muslim.
I did. Yes, I started reading Yahya's books in the 1990s, late 1990s, where he was basically repeating the literature from the Christian creationists.
The American right, sort of.
From the American right. It was almost total reproduction of that literature. And I was taken in by Harun Yahya's books because he was quoting from respected scientists like Richard Dawkins, Stephen Jay Gould and others, who appeared to be claiming that the theory of evolution was on its last legs, that they were expressing serious doubts that the diversity we see around us in the animal kingdom could have arisen through the mechanism of natural selection. And I was convinced by this. I thought, look, this is an atheist, materialist conspiracy to undermine faith. It's only when I went to the actual books by Richard Dawkins and Stephen Jay Gould that I realised actually the deception was on the part of Harun Yahya and the creationists. Dawkins, Gould and others were quite firm.
Ken Miller's interesting because he's a religious man and a great...
And Ken Miller wrote a fantastic book called Finding Darwin's God, and he's absolutely a Catholic and a staunch evolutionist. He made clear, that, and all these scientists make clear, that evolution, the theory of evolution is in incredibly good health. And the point of a good theory is that it explains facts and it makes predictions. And theory of evolution has passed every test continuously. And if it was false, anyone could come forward with a better theory. If anyone could find, I mean, I think J.B.S. Haldane gave the example of a fossil rabbit in the Cambrian. End of story for evolution, but it's never happened. All the fossils we have always found in the right place, the right temporal sequence. That gives the theory of evolution enormous explanatory power.
Of Everest? Because Everest used to be at the bottom of the sea.
There's Everest at the bottom of the sea?
No.
You know Everest was at the bottom of the sea.
You find the highest whale fossils in the world are found in the Himalayas. Yeah. Did they climb up there?
So where does this leave Adam for you? Because let's get on to this literal interpretation of God putting his hand down, creating Adam out of the clay, which has been argued is a very sort of beautiful metaphor for what actually did happen in the creation of human life. But where does it leave the literal reading of the Quran for you?
I think it's a shame that some Muslims cannot get beyond the literal reading of the Quran. In the past, many Muslim scholars...
It's the word of God. It's a passed down word of God.
Many Muslim scholars had no problem with interpreting the story of Adam symbolically. And even for example, Professor Mohamed Ali Harrath, who is a professor at SOAS, interprets it in symbolically. Ibn Khaldun, the famous sociologist, Tunisian sociologist, made clear in his view that human beings have common ancestors with apes purely on anatomical similarities. So they were happy. Muslim scholars were happy.
Read further
if I can just say this, when Darwin...
I think we all need to read further, don't we?
When Darwin proposed his theory, it was scorned. Darwin was scorned for promulgating the Mohammedan theory of evolution because people believed this theory was actually first propagated by Muslim scholars.
The Mohammedan, they called it the Mohammedan theory of evolution.
The shame is that we have lost that learning. We have lost that learning.
Ibn Khaldun, Miskawayh, Al-Jahid, that you and others like you like to quote, they did not talk about biological evolution. They talked about man evolving to angel, then to God. You believe in that?
From primates
as
well.
They had the notion of the great. I forgot the term actually. But they didn't believe in the biological evolution. They understood the evolution in a different way. Not
the Muslim understanding of evolution, if I may,
is really irresponsible for yourself.
Different interpretations. We're not going to get to the bottom of it here with the Islamic interpretations.
If you go to quote scholars and you're not understanding what the scholars are saying.
Scholars and scholars, though. Adam, you ran this conference last weekend. Have Muslims misunderstood evolution? You had some Muslim scientists on, or scientists who are Muslims, explaining it, and I think you had quite a turnaround in people seeing new things.
Indeed. The whole objective of the conference and the objective of the Deen Institute was to get the scholars of the text, namely the Muslim theologians and the scholars of the context, the scientists, to come together and have transparent dialogue and to provide a cogent response to the challenges that Muslims are facing. Because I think many Muslims have become disillusioned with the lack of transparent dialogue between Muslim theologians and Muslim scientists. And so it was very, very productive. We had great feedback from the conference itself. We did actually face some resistance, unfortunately. There were attempts to quash the debate, quash dialogue.
Why?
Well, you'd have to ask them. But there were
I'll wait in a minute.
Yeah. There were attempts to sort of sabotage and also censor the
But that's bizarre, something that 99.8% of scientists across the world accept. And how bad does that look?
Very bad, absolutely. If we read the Quran over and over again says to ponder, to reflect, and to inquire into evidence. The scholars, the Muslims, the medieval Muslims of the past, they didn't shy away from grappling with the latest scientific discoveries and developments in philosophy, and something's gone wrong.
Yeah. Well, why did you... We've got here the founder of the Islam channel. 80% of Muslims in this country watch the Islam channel. You did not, Mohammed, want this conference to take place. You objected to it. Why?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want it to go ahead because from an activism point of view, it's not anything to do with theology or with Islam, or it is bringing an issue which is not a current issue for us Muslims. We have so many problems of integration, underachievement, and so on. And we are having a Byzantine discussion.
Byzantine? What do you mean?
Yes.
Sort of complicated and obscure?
Well, it's not complicated and obscure because we are discussing something which is not relevant to our real everyday issues. And making it...
Science is
no, please, let me...
isn't it?
It's not... I'm talking from an activism point of view. But going back to our discussion, there is no difference between text and context. In fact, in Islam, you can't be a scholar until you know the context, because you are using the divine, you are using the revelation to understand the context, to understand what is happening.
Do you understand the theory that these are scientists of? Do you understand it? Have you read much of...
And there is no difference. There is no difference between science and religion in Islam. I'm talking about the Muslim faith. In fact, you can't understand the revelation, the text, if you don't use your reason and your mind.
Harun Yaha, this Turkish creationist, on your channel all the time.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's not fine.
We can't discuss Harun Yahya because it is a work not of Harun Yahya. It's a work of academics, of a group of people. We can't discuss it and another. But let me clarify. No, let me clarify.
Inayat, come back in here.
Mohammed, I think
because
I agree with one
so
point
many
you
things were said, attributed to Islam and Muslim scholars.
Hands in a minute.
We should be discussing important issues. I mean, science is hugely important. Many Muslim societies have become consumer society. We're not leading in the sciences as we once did historically. It would be wonderful to lead again. Now, science is an incredible driver of economic growth. Muslim societies need jobs. We need income. By excelling in the sciences, we will help solve many problems.
No, that's my exact point. I'm not going to achieve jobs and development through discussing evolution. I'm saying it is the wrong...
Science.
It is the wrong topic. But if I'm here to discuss it with you, you attribute it to Muslim scholars. If it was discussed 75 years or 100 years ago within the Christian faith, it was discussed more than 700 years ago within the Islamic context.
But they didn't have the genome then, did they?
No, I'm telling you.
But God did not say to, you know, God did not explain to Muhammad about RNA and DNA and allopatric speciation, did he?
He did not. But he gave signs. There are so many signs there in the Quran that Earth is much older than 6,000 or 10,000 or 1 million years.
I don't want you lot to start arguing with each other about the age of the Earth.
Matt Ridley, if we're going to give a lot of equal time on the air to all the different views about evolution, then let's give time to the theory that the Great Spaghetti Monster created the Earth 2,000 years ago. You know, why privilege this one version and your argument that it's a waste of time to talk about this on the air. The same applies to Haldoon's theory.
Let's see what people are making of it. We've got a hand back there, blue shirt. Good morning. Quick point, please. Hello.
I'd just like to say that that's not actually the only Muslim perspective. In fact, I believe, and as an Ahmadi Muslim, we believe that Adam was not the first man, that he was not spontaneously created. In fact, the first mention of Adam in the Quran is in the words, I'm about to put a Khalifa in the earth. So right from the word go, he is said to be a human being. And in fact, the Quran rejects this idea of spontaneous creation when it says, and what is the matter with you that you do not dignify Allah, that you ascribe this, lack of dignity to Allah, while He has created you in stages? Yeah. And then it says, and He has created you as a growth growing like the vegetation from the earth.
Which is entirely contrary to what these guys are saying. That's theologically, that's very exciting for you, isn't that?
That is a demonstrable.
You're not happy about that, are you?
No, I'm not. It's not
Adam Deen.
Yeah, I just want to say that...
It's not a matter of happy or not happy.
My friend here, Mohamed Ali, said that he didn't object to it religiously. Well, that's incorrect because he said that it was an attack against the very foundations of Islam. So it was religious. And he said it's not important. Well, that's utter rubbish. I've spoken at over 40 universities in this country, and I am always encountering Muslims that are having difficulties with this topic. We cannot have an ostrich mentality. The problem is not going to go away. We need to confront the evidence and provide cogent answers.
And there's nothing more...
One more, Mohammed, one more.
No, because there is misrepresentation here. People are putting statements forward. When the scholars of Islam discussed this issue, what the conclusion they came out with, yes, they said there are so many similarities between animals and human beings and other animals. But the conclusion they came out with, the creator is one. They all were designed, all were engineered, all were created.
Engineered? Is that not rather insulting of God to say that God is an engineer?
It's not insulting.
The chief rabbi said God is a gardener, not an engineer. You plant a garden and then it sustains itself.
I am not a Jew. I am a Muslim.
I didn't think you were.
Well,
I'm just saying.
No, I'm talking explaining myself to the public. What I'm saying is the result they came out with, Muslims, there is no single Muslim scholar who believes in evolution.
I understand. Let's get back to... Yes, sir, what would you like to say?
I'd just like to say that I think we're missing some of the beauty that evolution offers as an argument, as a theory. And if we look at evolution, with chance, with novelty in the world, without this great plan that's preordained beforehand, comes in genuine human freedom. And I think that's something to absolutely celebrate. And that's not arrogance, that gives us an ability to create things. And we should, as human beings, should be proud that we are one of the few species that can create.
Robert, just as a Christian, as a paleontologist, one of the leading paleontologists in the world, at Cambridge University, does this enhance your faith? Do you see do you see God in this?
Well, insofar, I guess, as I view God as the author behind natural law, yes, I do. You know, the reasons why I grew up in a Christian household, and that's really the reason why I adhere to Christianity. What deepens my faith about Christianity is a bit more on the scriptural side, you know, and I could recite the platitudes that you all have heard, which doesn't lessen their impact. Treat others as you would be treated yourself. Let your yes be yes, your no be no. Where 2 or 3 of you are gathered, there I am among you. I mean, all of these things, I think, epitomize really, really positive aspects of our human society. And if, you know, you don't have to be Christian, obviously in Islam there are equally beautiful statements about the human condition, and to the extent that we can all celebrate that, that's what deepens my faith as a religious person. I kind of view that a bit apart from a mechanism behind, you know, biodiversity, which is where Charles Darwin comes into the picture.
Yeah, and how do you view the fears of, we're related 6 million years ago? A lot happens in 6 million years to monkeys, and they think we are diminished by the fact that we share an ancestor with a chimpanzee. Do you understand that discomfort?
I think it's an is-ought error to view history and to say that, well, you know, this is how it happened, therefore I should do something, is utterly wrong. And consider the opinion of someone who says, well, you know, it's gravity that led to the atomic bomb to be dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Gravity must be wrong. Clearly, this is a nonsensical response, and to be honest, this is kind of what I'm hearing from the various anti-Darwin crowds. Darwin, and any modern scientist who's interested in biology, looks at natural selection as a mechanism, and it is what happened. It does not tell us what we should do. It tells us what has happened.
Marjorie, Pastor Marjorie, if, and I know you believe, like our friends Steve and Greg, that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old, and you believe in the literal account of Adam, Genesis 1 or Genesis 2, whatever. Sorry?
That's not the most important issue.
No, but I haven't finished.
It's the science behind it.
I haven't finished. If you were to find out that the scientists over here and the vast majority of scientists in the world are right, would it shake your faith?
Let me
take you to that. Please, just answer that one first. If they're right, would it shake your faith one iota?
If they are right, I don't even want to say that they are right.
Is it a deal breaker?
But if you push me to it, if they are right, it wouldn't shake my faith in God.
Well, what's the problem?
But no, that's not the issue. The Bible is our standard, and speaking as a born-again Christian, someone that believes in the scriptures, you know, God isn't prodigal. I come from a background where English isn't my first language. So when I read English, I take a lot of pause. If you read the whole of Genesis, the whole of the scripture, it just runs through the whole scriptures.
There's different accounts in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, though. Which do you
1,
believe?
2, 4,
Not really?
6,
Not really.
9.
Genesis 1 and 2 belong together. They're one continuous account.
Just hold on a bit. Let me just say
that. Let Marjorie finish, then we'll get on to...
Yes, it just runs through. God isn't prodigal. If he keeps saying, I created man in my image, after my likeness, he just keeps, he wouldn't use words that...
Why did he give man nipples?
Why did he give man?
Nipples.
Nipples. He created man in his image. Man, even women have nipples as well. And so he created man...
Did God write the Bible?
When you, hold on, when you write as a manager, if you ask your secretary, dictate a letter to your secretary, that letter belongs to you. It's the manager's letter. The secretary only typed. The scriptures were written by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit through people. So God wrote the Bible.
Right, okay.
Can I just quickly say that?
Steve's eyes twinkled. He's a great, I know, but he's a great,
he's been speaking.
He's a great geneticist and scientist. And when you said it wouldn't shake your faith one iota. Your eyes twinkled.
Yes, I mean, it seems to me that, you know, I have to say I find the argument from our Islamic friends much more convincing than I do from the 6,000-year group. But one thing alarmed me...
That's not the issue.
Let me finish.
It's how
one thing,
change
let me finish. One thing really genuinely alarmed me in this discussion, when my colleague here talked about the Jewish view of creation. You said, I'm not a Jew. Does that mean there are rules, scientific rules that apply to Jews, scientific rules that apply to...
I can't speak on behalf of another text of another religion. I'm not qualified to speak on behalf of the Jews. I'm speaking on behalf of my faith.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm always reminded, there was a great mathematician, a Frenchman called Laplace, who wrote a book called Cosmic Mechanics. And the great Napoleon, who was a highly intelligent man, tried to read this mathematically difficult book. And he got to the end of it, and he went to Laplace, and he said, why is there no mention of God in this book about the universe? And Laplace said something very profound. I have no need of that hypothesis. In other words, adding God to the argument makes no difference to the science. If you wish to add God to the argument, I am perfectly happy with that. But the science can stand on its own 2 feet.
Can I just say, you said,
Marjorie.
Just a minute. You said at the beginning that science is willing to say we're wrong, and that you would always get to the place where you just key in with the scriptures.
That's the nature of science.
Yes, I'm just here to say that science is always, check the pattern, science has always come to agree eventually with the scriptures. And we are waiting for science to one day say,
can I just
yes,
add one small sentence? Okay. This evening, I mean, so you can cut this out. This evening, I have to send...
If only, Steve.
This evening, I have to send in a book manuscript, which I've spent the past 3 years writing. It's called The Serpent's Promise, and it's an attempt to rewrite the Bible as if it were a scientific textbook, okay? And it's been a fascinating experience to discover that actually many of the questions asked both by the Bible and by the Quran are exactly the questions which scientists ask. And the parallels between the two
It's not
are
an accident,
amazing.
you know. That's historically how it happened.
Yeah, I know. I found it a deeply interesting phenomenon, but it has not made me religious. It's made me less religious because I realise that in the Testament, in the Quran to a lesser extent, people are not willing to change their minds. Scientists are always willing to change their minds.
Linda, isn't it the case, though, that we have to get onto this, you know, people can believe what they want, right? And, you know, if it's fairies at the bottom of the garden or whatever, that we were created in a puff of smoke, that's fine, let them get on with it. But isn't there a danger when they want to teach children that stuff?
Well, the great religious traditions have been around a long time, and they've had quite a lot of the bugs taken out of them in terms of their rather proven ways of living well. Doesn't mean to say there aren't all sorts of bits and pieces in them that can go in very extreme directions. And actually, that's what we're seeing here. I mean, let's get a bit of perspective. In this country, about 10% tops of people are young Earth creationists. The vast majority of people believe in evolution and have some sort of religious or spiritual belief. And then there are about 30% of people who are atheistic evolutionists. And actually, the tragedy, in a way, is that very hard forms of atheistic evolutionary Darwinist, neo-Darwinism, if you like, even pseudo-Darwinism, have entered into battle with a small group of creationist people, and they just keep stirring each other up.
And it's counterproductive. You don't change minds by shouting at people.
Young Earth creationism is created in the modern scientific era, and they keep feeding each other. So let's imagine Richard Dawkins hadn't existed, and he hadn't written his version of Darwin, because it's one version. You know, Darwin, in a way, the theory is a kind of stub, and people build on it and add things on it. Herbert Spencer added things onto it. Various people in every generation add things on. Dawkins adds on a view which seems to many people to say life is just completely meaningless. You might as well go out there and do whatever you like. And a lot of religious people think, hang on a minute, I'm not going to teach that to my children. So it unnecessarily puts them off a perfectly acceptable and, as everyone is saying, well-established theories.
So, Steve, actually, Robert puts it very well in his book. It's either evolution did it, so there's no God, is as much of a non sequitur as God did it, so there's no evolution.
Yeah, that's right. It seems to me one of the ways to get around the problem you're raising, and this is in a way would be very controversial in the United States, where there's this clear separation of religion from the public school classroom, is to show how, in fact, a lot of our scientific ideas, if not most of them, came from some sort of religious metaphysical framework as a teaching device. That is to say, to get religiously oriented students, of which there are a lot of various persuasions, to show that science is not antithetical to what they're, to them or their interests, but in fact actually comes out of this sort of inquiry into the nature of things, understood way beyond just what it takes to survive in everyday life. I mean, one of the great ironies you might see, and this is something that Thomas Henry Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, pointed out toward the end of his life, was that it was very important that Newton, who was a very God-intoxicated man, came before Darwin, because had it been the other way around, human beings would never have had the ambition to try to understand, the entire cosmos in the mind of God, which is, of course, what, in a sense, science is still very much about, because Darwin's notion of man is a very diminished notion. It's one where, in a sense, the kind of knowledge that's most relevant to us is the knowledge that's just relevant to adapt and to reproduce in our natural environments, not to find out about the Big Bang or what was happening in the beginning of time or anything like that.
Darwin's view that, understanding biodiversity via natural selection or descent with modification somehow diminishes humanity, I think that's completely off. I mean, there's
his own view of humanity was pretty diminished when it got right down to it.
Well, diminished. I mean, you could be practical and you could recognize the connections that we have with other forms.
In terms of the people who believe in progress, he was one of the most anti-progress people around.
That's Robert's response.
No, that's pretty much it, really. I mean, this is sort of a philosophical, qualitative statement that Steve is saying, and I'm quite sympathetic with what you're saying in terms of, the monotheistic traditions leading to an expectation that the cosmos and life will make sense. That I'm with you on, but to somehow get from that to natural selection makes humanity somehow diminished, that does not follow at all.
You can say you've got unique dignity, but not that you're unique. Yeah. That's what you can't
say.
No,
but look, let's put it this way.
But you believe in common descent.
Yes, I'm not the issue here.
But why do you have a problem with common descent? The fact that we're related to chimpanzees? I don't have a problem with common descent, but I do think that there's an enormous amount of prejudice against young Earth creationists on this matter. And one of the things that happens in this debate...
the same way that there's prejudice against a flat Earth.
No. Well, this is a big difference. There are research programs going on.
But you're entitled to believe what you want. They can believe the Earth's 5 minutes old. But saying
it's not entitlement. It's a matter of conducting a scientific research program. I think you need to take what these guys are saying a little more seriously as far as being proper science is concerned. And one of the things that happens in this debate very often, especially when we do get people on the young Earth creationist side, is all of a sudden evolution becomes this enormously expansive term, right? It basically can be any kind of natural process. It's no longer just Darwin's specific view. It's a whole broad range of things as long as you keep the young Earth creationists out. And so there's a...
Well, I mean, what do you think about that?
This is a typical example, really, of how the argument shifts. There's a lot of what Steve said I agree with entirely about the religious motivation of people who try to understand the nature of the cosmos. And then suddenly, you see, when that inquiry takes them to a certain point, he objects. Now, that seems to me to be... Why are you introducing a new premise that certain of these discoveries that people have made, driven possibly by a God-given sense of inquiry, are unacceptable?
I need to move us on slightly to how damaging is this? I mean, other religions don't have a particular problem with this. Inayat, how damaging is this potentially in the long term if things don't evolve, if you like, for Islam?
Well, 1,000 years ago, Muslims were, when Europe was in the Dark Ages...
Because India and China don't have a problem with this.
Absolutely. Muslim civilization was shining a light to the world. Muslims were very open to learning, and Europe learned from those studies. I think if we want to see Muslim societies regain the initiative and become leaders and innovators in science again, we will have to embrace that learning. We'll have to learn and not just reject it simply because it disagrees with our interpretation of Scripture. It could be, it's not the science that's wrong, but it's our current interpretation of Scripture that is wrong.
Well, it is not science.
Yes, go on, Steve.
The reason there's a conflict between evolution and Christianity is because
there isn't a conflict between evolution and Christianity. Most Christians, as Linda just said, accept evolution. There's a conflict between evolution and your brand of Christianity.
Well, I believe what the Bible is teaching, because Christianity is not this sort of nice moral framework. It's about history, it's about events, it's about what God has done in history. And that is where the conflict comes.
Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt.
Absolutely, and it's fundamentally about the history of death. Because why did Jesus die on the cross? Because death is a punishment for sin. That is at the very heart of the Christian faith. And if you're saying death has come through sin, then that has to contradict Darwinism, where it says death has always been present.
Steve Lloyd, you know about apoptosis. You know about the importance
of
death.
I'm not talking about cell death. I'm talking about the death of creatures, as described. The Bible doesn't talk about cell death. I'm not trying to use it as a scientific textbook.
I mean, you know, if you use these terms, it's kind of on your shoulders to be actually very precise and to, you know, somewhere you're drawing a line between a kind of death that I presume you're perfectly happy to acknowledge existed for as long as life itself has existed. You cannot have a plant. You cannot have any kind of life if there's not some kind of programmed cell death in the course of development.
Absolutely.
Do you disagree with that?
Absolutely, but that's
so
the way you're using death as a scientific term. I'm trying to use death as it's used in the Bible, because it's not done in a scientific
way. Now we're kind of getting into the realm of interpretation.
No, human death and most animal death has not always been with us.
Right.
No. Right. And that is
removed. It's going to be removed.
Yeah,
going to be.
What did he say? When people who are religious make claims about science, make assertions about science, which are anti-scientific, then there is a problem. Similar thing, someone mentioned earlier, when scientists make claims about atheistic claims about evolution, that is a problem as well, because science has nothing to say about questions of meaning, questions of purpose. Similarly, I think it's just as problematic when religious people make claims about science which are totally contradictory to what we know.
And also, Matt, as a former religious person, there's a problem, isn't there, when religious people say God did it, because that decapitates scientific inquiry, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's very... to base your morality on the fact that you were told that something is the right thing to do by an authority means that when you then lose your faith in that authority, suddenly you're in a moral vacuum, which is, of course, not the way it works. The way it works is that someone like me comes to the conclusion that actually there are much better reasons to be moral in this world than because a carpenter in Palestine told me to.
We're not talking about whether God exists, because there are people who believe that God exists on this side as well.
But it's possible to imagine that you can evolve
Sorry,
moral sense.
Coming back, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Coming back to Inayat's point regarding Muslim history, I agree that Muslim history is completely different from the Christian history. We welcome scientific discoveries and so on and so forth. But just because we don't accept human evolution, the way
some of you do,
but that's a wrong interpretation of Islam. Coming back to the point about scholars, he has not given me.
What would it take to convince you? I mean,
I'm convinced that the Quran is the word of God.
Oh, that's
and the Quran is explicit and clear about the human evolution. Okay, so he has not, and others have not given me a scholar, a reputable scholar, regarding from the Muslim perspective about evolution.
Hands up, you sir. What would you like to say? Somebody just said Wikipedia to you. Later on. Carry on.
What I was going to say, I think that although kind of Christianity and religion is seen as this kind of previous authority within history, I think science does seek to be an authority within itself as well. And I'd say that science, when they're wrong, they hold their hands up, but it still shows a sign of inconsistency.
A lot of things.
So all science is tentative, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at one point,
which is a great strength of science.
At one point, we believed in race science, and which led on to.
But we don't now.
No, we don't now. So we just believe what we believe at the time.
Abdullah, is it? He said that, well, I believe the Quran is the word of God. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, I'm a Muslim. I'm an Ahmadi Muslim. When I read the Quran, it's very clear that it elucidates scientific principles. In fact, 750 verses of the Quran, an eighth of it exhort believers to think and ponder and reflect, compared to 250, which is legislative. Now, for example, there's chapter 28, verse 69, which says, "And Allah creates and then selects. It is not for them to select. Glorified be He far above that which they associate with Him." So I put it to him that he believes in the Word of God, and the Word of God clearly speaks of the fact that God creates and then selects, and seems to address the atheistic scientists of today, and says it is not.
It's not just atheistic scientists.
The Quran.
No, but what I'm saying is,
let's go over here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to a previous point that he said the idea of evolution does not diminish God. I think it does, because there's evidence for evolution, strong evidence, and there's none for the existence of any gods. And there's also the fact that an all-knowing God can't decide. He has to keep on modifying his creations during evolution.
But yeah, yes, but that's what is 4.5 billion years to a god? You know, Inayat, do you think that? And I'm interested in those people who are theistically. You can in a minute on this side. Do you think that they are missing a great beauty here?
Well, I mean, the theory of evolution is enormously beautiful because, you know, you've been talking about the story of Adam.
I don't disagree with that.
If you can interpret it symbolically by meaning,
Can't,
human beings.
the Quranic text
hold on, please let me
clear.
say.
There's no ambiguity in that.
You're wrong. Muslim scholars do interpret symbolically, and
you're
if we understand it to mean that all of us human beings are related.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're all related. Okay, I'm going to try math. Wait, please. That didn't work, did it? I'm going to try math now as a sort of natural selection. Boom, it's you. If you were religious, what would you find in evolution to inspire you? Let me take you there.
That's a good question. And I've always been curious that the discovery of the universal nature of the genetic code, in other words, that all life shares one genetic code, hasn't been seized on more by these guys. I don't think actually it persuades me of any religious point, but it is actually an argument they could have used. There's all sorts of arguments they could come across and look at evolution and get all sorts of nuggets out for their pulpits if they wanted. I don't think any of them go that way. I agree with the guy who said actually wherever we look for evidence for God we don't find it,
Nick,
and we keep pursuing it and we're not finding it.
Greg.
Our problem with this position, though, is that the DNA to code the kinds that God created is said in Genesis to be in their seed. But there are limits to the change.
Spot the bit in Genesis where DNA is mentioned.
Each with its seed. It's shorthand, translatable into any culture to understand.
Could anything? Okay, we're beyond the.
But that's like reading.
We're beyond the validity of
the limits of
we're coming to the end.
The limits of change are the problem.
We're beyond the validity of the theory. Would anything?
You have a tree of life.
Greg,
there's trees of life.
Would anything convince you? Would anything convince you?
Science would convince me, but nobody's ever been able to create new information from the seed.
New information, Robert Asher. Wait, Robert Asher, new information.
Yeah, no, it's true nonsense. This notion that natural processes cannot create information. You know, one example that I discuss in my book, and I'm sitting next to Steve Jones, of course, who's discussed it in a lot more books than I have, is, you know, a trichromatic vision in mammals, right? Yeah. So the fact is, and I don't know, are you aware of anything about the basis for your perception of red, greens, and blues?
But that information would have already been
Okay, so you're not aware of the basics about red, greens, and blues. So you have 3 opsin genes, 2 of which are on one of your sex chromosomes, and 1 of which is on an autosome. And the fact is that one of those genes resulted from a duplication event that we share with other opsin genes that we can actually find in the order of primates. And all you need is one single nucleotide polymorphism. One SNP is what it's called. And that changes your sensitivity from one of these wavelengths to another. And the fact that you had an additional gene, you know, that had been duplicated, one mutation is all it takes. And then you perceive a subtly different color spectrum. And that is an increase of information.
How exciting is that? That's not exciting, is that? Listen, we are at the end, but I've got to say thank you all very much indeed. This debate will no doubt continue. I feel it will on Twitter and online. Greg and Inayat have already posted contributions. Next week we're in Glasgow. From now, it's goodbye from everyone in London. Thank you for watching.
And it's Sunday Politics. Next on BBC One, Communities Secretary Eric Pickles joins Andrew Neil.